How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name's Josh Hutchinson. Today, Binksy and I are going to discuss some of our personal bold predictions for the upcoming fantasy hockey season. It's hot take season, baby! Binksy, how you doing today?
I'm good, brother. It's good to see you. It's good to be here. I'm ready to do some boiling hot takes.
Hell yeah, dude. How have your drafts been? I just finished my last draft last night. We've been drafting together in a couple leagues the last couple nights. But I'd like to know how you're feeling. Are you all done drafting? How are you feeling about your teams right now?
So thus far, in this season-long formats, I've felt really great in best balls. I feel really great in best balls on underdog, right? And drafting kind of costs an array of possibilities. And transitioning to drafting in Yahoo has been a little bit more difficult. I know you talked about this on the recent pod with Nate. It's so different, right? So even looking at your own projections and your own Vort models, like trying to collate that with the actual ADP in front of you, like I missed on Grubauer in a draft we had together because I just couldn't find him. Like, I'm dumb and I didn't think to just search for his name, but I just couldn't find him in the list. And I was like, well, he must be gone. I must have missed it, right? And instead, his ADP was like 500. Like, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So it's been a rough transition, but the actual teams I'm really happy with. My strategy from rounds 1 to 10, I'm like locked in. Like, I know exactly what I want from different draft positions. Where it gets a little bit uglier for me, where I'm not as confident, has been rounds 11 through like 14, where there's like 30 players that I'm fine to get. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll wait for this guy in the next round, etc. And those are the rounds where I feel like I'm getting sniped. And so maybe a little bit back to the drawing board as far as like 11 through 14, but that's where you start to take lotto tickets, and even what I think might be like a complete miss at this point might be a good thing, and I just don't know it. So overall, I feel pretty good about it. What about you?
I definitely had the same issue with Yahoo. I was used to, like, we were drafting in Fantrax for, I mean, how many weeks? Like over a month? Like with
Yeah,
best
at least a
ball.
month.
Like I did a couple dynasty startups. I did we were doing the cupful that starts in Fantrax for the slow draft, and then the 5-hole fantasy hockey listener league was also a slow draft in Fantrax. So but then, like, basically once all of those were done, I had 5 nights in a row of Yahoo drafts, and I found that ADPs were really throwing me. Like, I know I mentioned this on stream, but it was really throwing me off, and like I was having a really hard time actually judging. And not to mention, like, when you're in really competitive leagues and you're not just like trying to clown your friends, it's a lot more difficult to find value because people are just going to grab their guys, right? So everyone's got their own draft strategy. Everyone values things different, and Yahoo's ADPs were just at another level of insane this year. So that was definitely difficult. I'm not really sure. I mean, I still think I found value in a lot of guys, but it was definitely more difficult than I expected. I tweeted this, but I have 4 guys that I drafted 4 times, and I'm not sure how stoked I am. But Roman Josi, I have him in 4 leagues. But Arturi Lehkonen and Sergei Bobrovsky, and I'm a little nervous about the fact that I have Bobrovsky in so many in so many places. He was just so available late in drafts. So going 0G. But then that's the thing, right? Is didn't spend a lot of draft capital, so if I need to drop him, it's not a big deal. So, anyways, just thought that was kind of interesting. Are there any guys that you felt like you were getting in every league?
Man, even across different formats and different actual like apps for drafting, I seem to just end up with Malkin in like the 8th to 10th round over and
Yeah.
over and over and over again, because whether I went center earlier or not, I feel like that's immense value. And even though, the likelihood that he plays a full 82 is pretty slim given the track record across his career, like the possibility of getting a player attached to Crosby and a perennial like point per game player, like I just take it every single time. So if he's a massive bust, it's definitely going to send shockwaves through my fantasy season.
Yeah, that's very fair. That's super fair. All right. Well, we've brought 3 bold predictions each, or I mean, we're gonna call them hot takes. I know. Nate was calling it bold predictions. I like the term hot takes. You and I used that last year when we did this episode, but we're going to do the Binksy and Hutch edition right now, and then Nate and Blake are gonna come on and have the Nate and Blake edition of bold predictions. So we've each brought 3 today. And we're going to hash them out and discuss them. I'm going to throw to you, Binksy. What is your first hot take for the upcoming season?
So the first hot take for me for the upcoming season, and we're gonna ramp up the heat as we go through these sets. So keep that in mind with my first edition here. My first hot take for the 23-24 season is that none of the previous season's top 5 defensemen and point scorers will repeat. That top 5, Erik Karlsson with 101 points, as everybody knows. Second place, Josh Morrissey with 76. Third place, Quinn Hughes with 76. Fourth place, Dougie Hamilton with 74. And fifth place, Brandon Montour with 73. So I think Montour, we talked about off air, perhaps, we designate that as a pace position rather than a total output, right, given the injury. But I think either way, it's going to be a transition for them. I think the Panthers are going to have a little bit of a rough start to the season, and if things go really, really rough, then maybe a rough rest of the year as well. I think the Devils are going to be so strong, just basically across like their top 10 or 11 players, that it's going to kind of limit the overall output for Dougie Hamilton. I'm sure he'll have a great season, but I think he's going to be supplanted in this top 5 list. I'm hearing a lot of really good things about Quinn Hughes and about his offensive prowess, where he's like starting to shoot more and to get more high danger chances in the preseason. But that's 2 games, right? 2 games at 20 plus minutes early in the preseason. So I don't know how much stock to take in that, but I want to believe, because what Quinn Hughes really, really needs is to be more well-rounded, right? Like if he could just fire the puck more, then it would really push him higher. But I don't necessarily see that happening, even with the positive narrative thus far. I think Morrissey is pretty much a lock to not repeat. I wouldn't be shocked at all if Pionk really takes that job and runs with it. I think obviously they're gonna give it to him to begin the season as the incumbent, but there's no guarantees there. And I think a lot of us definitely see some negative regression coming just based on the output and the metrics. Erik Karlsson, I think, is going to be a phenomenal defensive player this year, but given that it's looking like they're going to share power play time, at least to begin the year, I think there's a really good chance that drops by 30 points, right? Which puts him likely outside of the top 5 again. So wouldn't shock me if he was 5 or 6 or 7 and it was like a 3-way tie for 5th place. But I earnestly don't see any of these 5 guys returning to the top 5 next year.
Interesting. So yeah, I think that is hot. I think that's pretty hot. We were talking about it before. I mean, I don't think it's hot to think that there's some negative regression coming for some of these guys, specifically Karlsson and Morrissey. Karlsson is not getting 100 points again. His luck metrics were redlining like crazy. Yeah, like you said, he's going to be sharing a little bit more time. He's not going to be playing a ton. He's going to be relied upon to at least play a little bit of defense because Pittsburgh wants to win. I think, I mean, I still think he's going to be productive. I do still think that it's reasonable to expect him to be in the top 5. That's the thing, though. I think that he could still, like, if he still was a point per game, and that's even, I mean, that's a 20-point drop off of where he was last year. I think that's still reasonable. Like I wouldn't be shocked. And that would probably put him in the top 5 easily. Josh Morrissey, I definitely see negative regression coming. I'm not sure that I'm not sure that I see Neil Pionk supplanting him as their top D man or their top power play guy. I think he's pretty much proved last year that he's their guy, and I think Bonus. I mean, he's got the favor of Rick Bonus, but there definitely is some negative regression coming. I could see him dropping down to like 60, 65 points pretty easily. And then yes, absolutely, he would be dropping out of there. Quinn Hughes, I think, I mean, he's been pretty consistent in terms of point production. Obviously, he's not a top 5 fantasy guy just because he doesn't get all the peripherals. We were talking about him in the voice chat last night during the draft about like how everyone keeps talking every year about how Quinn Hughes is going to shoot more, and he says he's going to shoot more, and then he doesn't shoot more, and we're all just waiting for it. And it's like, I mean, yeah, well, this is the year he's going to shoot more, and it's like, no, I mean, that remains to be seen. But I still think that he's probably. I mean, he's another guy where if he got up to a point per game, which would be a career high, that wouldn't surprise me at all. So I still think that he could reasonably be in this top 5. Dougie Hamilton, I see him repeating. I just think he's such a monster. And Brandon Montour, I mean, I could see him dropping off as well, but mainly because of the injury. I'm just not sure that. That being said, I still see him coming back and slotting right in where he was before, on that top power play and being productive. Like I think that all the metrics there last year, it just seemed like he was for real. So, but yeah, I don't think this is an unreasonable take, but it's still a little bit hot. It's hot because you're saying that none of them will be in the top 5. That's the hot part, right? I see some of them dropping out, but maybe not all of them. So I think I can partially agree with you on that, but not fully.
Okay. All right. Little hot. Little hot.
We're gonna get hotter. So my first take is that Evgeny Kuznetsov will score between 70 and 80 points this year. There's been tons of talk about Kuznetsov asking for a trade, falling out of favor with Washington. My opinion has always been that I imagine that was a coaching issue. And Peter Laviolette, not there anymore. I don't think that it is a team issue. I think Kuznetsov has been a huge part of this franchise for, a better part of a decade. He's been a running mate of Ovechkin. He's been a staple on the power play. He's been a pretty productive player. And I know that there's a lot of talk about him being lazy and him being inconsistent, and that's true. I don't think that that's untrue. Okay. But the talent is immense here. Spencer Carberry is their new coach. He is a power play wizard. He knows how to use top offensive players to their strengths on the power play. He completely changed the Leafs power play before he came in to Toronto. He was working Florida's power play, and they were extremely productive even before they popped for that President's Trophy season. They had a really good power play over there. They brought Carberry into Toronto when they were just this stagnant power play where extremely predictable. they had all of this talent, and it just didn't seem like they were utilizing it properly. And then Carberry figured it out. And I think it's definitely possible for Washington to figure out their power play again. They still have a lot of weapons on their team, even though most of them are aging. They still got that Ovechkin one-timer. They still got John Carlson, who I expect to be productive. I don't see Carlson or Kuznetsov being left in the dust here. And we're seeing that so far in training camp. They had the old band back together on their power play reps so far. They've got Kuznetsov, Backstrom, Ovechkin, Oshie, and Carlson running on power play 1 right now. And they've also got Kuznetsov playing on line 2 with Tom Wilson. So I also could see him popping up onto line 1 again with Ovechkin. Last year, they were pushing him way down the lineup, and he wasn't playing with barely anybody. His shooting percentage was 6.98, which was by far the lowest of his career. Not that he's really a huge goal scorer or a high-volume shooter, but he's usually much more efficient than that. He's typically consistently 11%, and then the odd year, he'll go up to like 14. But 6 to 7% is way too low for him. That's going to positively regress. He also didn't play on power play 1 for a large chunk of the year last year. I don't anticipate that being the case. I know I kind of mentioned that already, but his on-ice shooting percentage also was the lowest of his career. So really, I don't know that this is actually that hot of a take. It's just not something it's not a common opinion. I think everyone is really down on Kuznetsov. I've heard essentially every podcast talk about how they're not touching him with a 10-foot pole. And I'm just like, okay, well, then I'll take him with my last pick of the draft. Washington's got a fantastic playoff schedule. They are tied with Anaheim for the most off nights in the league this year.
Big part of it.
If you're fading centers, he's a great guy to pick up with you. Like, he's not even being drafted in a lot of leagues. So I'm all over Kuznetsov this year. What do you think, buddy?
I absolutely agree with that. The situation, just the emotion with the coaching staff and the system should be much better, right? Like, he said repeatedly in English and in Russian that there were issues with the system last year for him, and he was being asked to do things that he didn't believe were his like best features, right? So there's not really any competition for him, right? Like, currently a line 2 player, but it's not going to surprise anyone if he's a line 1 player for the rest of the season, right? So I think a lot of this kind of banks on the health of Ovechkin at 37 plus this year. So obviously no guarantees at that age, but we've never seen a slowdown with Ovechkin. There's not really any reason to believe that if he is healthy that his play is going to fall off. So I think 70 to 80 points is the hot part of it for me. Like, if you were to say 60 points, I would say lock, right? If you were to say 60 to 70, I would say, okay, we're getting warmer. 80, like, he's certainly capable of it. We've seen it 3 and maybe 4 times across his career. And those are the years where he shoots more, he gets more time on ice, and his shooting percentage follows that, right? So I don't think any of that is like out of bounds. I don't think any of it's going to come out of left field. I think the biggest hinge for it is that, the situation for Washington is different, and it is different, right? Like, we have reason to believe that they're going to reinvest in him. And, like, in the back of your mind, you're like, does he get dealt at some point? But the way that they're going into the season, they seem to be like ready to fire the last few bullets of Ovi's career and the veteran core that's on that team. So I think at the very least they ride out this season with Kuznetsov. So I think the 70 to 80 part's a little bit hot, but I believe, like, especially in the teams where I've drafted Ovechkin, I've taken that stack at immense value at the end of the draft almost every time. Like, I think he's a great pick.
All right, Binksy, what do you got next for me?
Okay, this one's getting a little spice. Okay, this one's got this one's a dabble do you. Okay, And this one's a combo, so keep this in mind with how spicy that this gets, okay? I think that these two players will both be above 50 points, both be above 180 shots on goal, both be above 15% shooting, and both score correspondingly above 25 goals. I wanted to say 30 goals for both of these guys, but in reviewing the numbers, I think that would be a truly outlandish take for them to say that both of them would be above 30 goals. The two players on this list for me, Jakub Vrana and Kirill Marchenko. I think both of them are moving into phenomenal opportunities as offensive weapons who, for completely different reasons, have not had the space to be that offensive player. And both of them are slotting into lineups where exactly what they need to do is be the shooter, right? Like both of the offenses that they're working into have facilitators, have veteran presence, have playmakers, have scorers, and what they need to be is firing at will at whatever space on the ice that they're in. I think there's a good chance that both of these players play power play too and better if there's injuries, and both of the teams that they're on have injury histories. So I think there's a good chance that either of them hit one of these categories. I think it gets a little bit spicier to say that both of them do it, but the prowess for scoring and scoring at a relatively high efficiency is there for both players. And I think it could be a real breakout season for both of them.
I gotta be honest, man. I completely agree with you. um, Worth noting, Nate actually had both of these guys projected for all of these statistical um, all of these statistical categories that you said. Like he's got them smashing all of those numbers. So
Wow.
yeah, I mean, I actually maybe Marchenko, because Marchenko was a Cy Young guy last year. Actually, okay, so he's got him for sub 50 points, but he's got him for 26 goals. Um and yeah, I mean, I don't think that's unreasonable. Jacob Vrana is a crazy high efficiency shooter. He hasn't been able to really put it all together just because he hasn't been healthy. He was in the player assistance program last year, and just some unfavorable circumstances in his career. But I mean, I think it's completely reasonable to expect him to score over 25 goals. And like you said, I think they're neither of them are on PP1 right now. Marchenko has taken some reps on the top unit, so I think he's definitely on their radar in terms of like if there's an injury or if things just aren't working out with the unit early in the season. I think that Marchenko is definitely an option that's in the coaching staff's minds. But yeah, Vrana, I 100% see him getting some time on that top power play. But St. Louis again is another team where they kind of spread the wealth a little bit. It seems like they've kind of loaded up PP1 so far in the preseason, but I think that Vrana is 100% the next man up there. So and yeah, they're both going to shoot a ton, both going to convert. I mean, I think the sky's the limit for both of these guys. In terms of goals, at the very least, they're both going to be guys that put the puck in the net and not so much. They don't do so much playmaking, but they're definitely finishers. So I don't think that I don't think that's that hot. I think that's
Really? That's
I think that's
crazy to me.
reasonable. I think that's
Damn it.
reasonable. I think that's pretty reasonable. All right. I mean, okay. This is very similar. Okay, this is actually
Okay.
like a fairly similar take to this. To but all right, are you ready for this? And this
No.
isn't going to come to a surprise if you've been listening faithfully to the podcast. But I have Arthur Kaliyev for a 60-point breakout season. Last year, Arthur Kaliyev scored at a 41-point pace with just 1140 time on ice, and that was mostly fourth line minutes. He had a 10.66 shooting percentage last year, which was higher than his previous season, which was his rookie season. I think there's room for improvement there. I think that This is a guy that, I mean, everyone talks about the fact that he has a really good shot. I know that the Kings beat reporters, they talk about his shot being his best asset. I mean, very similar to Vrana and Marchenko in that way. But this is a guy that shoots a ton, very high volume shooter. Currently, his deployment situation is way better. He's currently playing on a clearly offensive line, potentially even like a 1B line for them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's technically when they talk about line rushes, it's line 2, but I think it's kind of a 1B line there. It's he's playing with Dubois and Kevin Fiala, which is such a nice situation. Best situation he's ever had in terms of deployment, the best players he's ever played with. I think his time on ice should greatly increase. And yeah, again, the quality of the teammates is just getting considerably better. There is also no one around that will reasonably compete for his spot. They were kind of clogged up on the wing last year in LA, so it was kind of hard for him to climb the ladder there. But Iafallo and Velarde went out of town in the Dubois trade, and that kind of freed up some space. As soon as that happened, I was like, I think it might be Arthur Kaliyev's season here. That's looking pretty good for him. And now, I mean, the early looks in the preseason are looking very favorable for him. So let's look at his rate stats. So last year, his rates stupidly good. His individual scoring chances 4/60, and now all of these numbers are they're for skaters who played more than 500 minutes last year. So he was 10th in individual scoring chances 4/60 in the league with 13.03. His individual Corsi 4/60 was 18th with 20.83. His shots per 60 was 23rd with 11.19. And I want to do a little exercise here. It's kind of like one of these names is not like the other type situation. So I have this list and it's ranked in order of individual scoring chances 4/60 in the league last year. So I'm going to start reading names. All right. John Tavares, number 1. Austin Matthews, Brady Tkachuk, Timo Meier, David Pastrnak, Zach Hyman, Matthew Tkachuk, Patrice Bergeron, Jack Hughes, Arthur Kaliyev. Okay. So those are the guys that are above him. Those are all elite players. A lot of those guys are first round fantasy assets. Let's keep reading. Stop me when you hear a name that doesn't make sense. Okay. Kirill Kaprizov, William Nylander, Evander Kane, Braden Point, Jake Gensel, Jeff Skinner, Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid, Tage Thompson, Carter Verhaeghe, Nazem Kadri, Jason Robertson, Philip Forsberg, Jordan Kyrou, Andrei Svechnikov, Kevin Fiala, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Brendan Gallagher. That's a little weird, but
there it is.
Yeah, I guess that's the other name. But he's always kind of been a guy that generates a ton. But look at the names that he's surrounded by here. And this isn't new. Like in his rookie season, he was also near the top of the league in these statistical categories. I think that he is just going to absolutely pop this year. 60 points is more than anyone's projected him for. I haven't seen anyone's projection like this. Now, this isn't really based on numbers. I mean, it is based on numbers, but I haven't done a specific calculation to come up with 60 points. I just feel like that is what he's going to hit this year with this deployment. So what say you, Binksy? I think that he is going to be the sleeper of the century. Maybe so, not. I mean, but
for years now, we've been talking about the rate stats for Arthur Kaliyev, right? Even in knowing that conversation and reviewing it week in and week out with injuries to wingers in LA over the last 2 years and who's going to be the player to benefit the most from that, I am still surprised to hear that rundown of players and to have him sit at, I think you said 10th, right? Like that's really, really serious, right? Like that is some serious company to be in. I wonder a bit how much of that has to do with him playing against bottom 6 talent
Sure.
on a team that is so deep, right? Like whatever team the Kings are playing, those forwards are run ragged by the time that Kaliyev was hitting the ice. Now, I have to draw that back a bit because when Moore was injured, when Iafallo was injured, when Velarde was injured, or went ice cold at stretches last year for Velarde, he filled in admirably in a more premier position, right? He was still doing those things. So I have a bit of pause, but we've also seen that bear out in his favor. I do wonder if it's Arvidsson's position to lose, right? Like all of the bets that I have been making as far as which one of those wingers is going to pop for the Kings. Fiala has cost too much in the drafts for me to snag it. Kaliyev is a metrics darling. And when, just like you spoke about earlier, like when you're in drafts with people that are so in tune, there are a lot of people out there going a round or two earlier for Kaliyev than I have, although I'm happy to roster him. And the dual eligibility for Victor Arvidsson has slanted me in that direction over and over and over again. So, like emotionally, I'm more invested in it being Arvidsson, and I think it's kind of more likely to me that he is the one of those two players that takes the opportunity there and runs with it. But it does say a lot that the Kings moved on from their two wingers in the offseason that were holding these two guys up, right? So I obviously Kaliyev has been getting that shot on the second quote unquote scoring line for them thus far in the preseason, but I part of me feels like they're trying it now while the games don't matter and seeing how he does to build that rapport. And then later, if there's a slump, they're going to go to Arvidsson. But that's just my gut, right? Like I haven't
Sure.
heard whispers of that. That's just kind of how I feel about it. So, the opportunity is there even if he is on the third line, right? Because the winger depth has dropped out just a little bit for them. So
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I agree. I'm not all the way in, but I definitely agree with the sentiment.
My opinion on the Arvidsson thing, I just wanted to touch on that, is that the third line for them, Deneau, Moore, and Arvidsson, they've been in unit. They were a unit all year last year. They were kind of the matchup line. They were like the defensively responsible line that they threw out there against the other team's best players. They're now the third line. They've just been pushed down because they have Dubois, Fiala, and Kaliyev moving up. My thought on that is Arvidsson is considerably more defensively responsible than Kaliyev. I think that's been Kaliyev's biggest wart from everything that I've heard, is that he is not very good in his own end, not very good on defense. He's kind of just like a straight offensive guy. So my thought is I think there's a pretty good chance that he sticks on that second line because they are going to get fairly favorable matchups because they're going to be matching Deneau against the best players on the other team. And they really have two scoring lines. They've got the Kempe, Kopitar, Byfield line, and then the Dubois, Kaliyev, Fiala line. And it's like they're like whoever's matchup line or defense first line or whatever you want to call them, third line on the other team, they're going to have to choose which line to match up against. So I think Kaliyev is going to stick there. Basically, it just feels like I think they're going to keep that third line together on the Kings. That's kind of my feeling, is that they're a unit, and I don't see Kaliyev being able to keep up with Deneau and Trevor Moore on a defensive unit. I just don't see that happening. I think if Arvidsson moves up, if Arvidsson does in fact move up the lineup, I could see Kaliyev moving down even further, like down to the fourth line.
Really?
But
okay.
I just
Yeah,
don't
I mean
see
that makes sense. That makes sense.
I don't.
There's such a defined role for each one of these lines, whether you want to call them 1, 2, and 3, right? Like they have such a specific purpose for the Kings as currently built. So yeah, I could
Yeah.
see that. Emotionally, I don't like it considering how many shares of Arvidsson I've got, but it makes total sense.
All right, buddy. Let's hear your last take.
Ooh, it was hot. Okay. Logan Cooley is your 23-24 Calder winner instead of Connor, who's a what's its face with the forearm, with the majestic forearms.
Yeah, with the big thighs.
I don't know, man. All of the rhetoric about how Connor Bedard is really slight in stature but really muscular, it seems like PR twist to me. So with that
I don't know.
said,
Have you seen any workout photos
said
of
by
him?
like, I mean, it's not just like pundits that are saying it. Like, there's scouts out there that are saying the exact same thing. So
Yeah.
I might just be a hater. But I think that Logan Cooley has the same runway that Bedard does in terms of opportunity and playing time. And I think the talent level is close. I don't think I do believe that Bedard will grow into be a generational talent, and they're certainly going to help him with that as Chicago moves forward out of just the like fog of awfulness that they've been in. But with Barrett Hayton really being the only competition for top line minutes in Arizona, there's really a minimal roadblock, right? Like Hayton's a decent center, but a 43-point scorer last year on their top line, which was, like in a really like quiet fashion, was pretty talented, right? Those two guys really carried that line quite a bit. And you put that talent, that ability to stretch defensemen with Logan Cooley out there, and I think they could be really, really successful. And whether or not that happens immediately or at all, power play one time is almost a guarantee for him. And I feel a little bit hypocritical noting the stature of Bedard, considering that Logan Cooley is also a smaller guy, right? But I also believe that every defensive game plan is going to be to rough up Bedard. There's no one on that team that's rough and tumble to protect him. And there are quite a few of those players in Arizona. And there's a lot more of a youth movement around him, right? There's a lot of young talent there to really like emotionally take off. Whereas I think there's going to be some real hard cold streaks for Connor Bedard. So I recognize that it's a hot take in that Connor Bedard is the next generation talent for the NHL, and it's going to take a really strong season from somebody else to supplant him based on just the storylines that are going to come out. The NHL is going to protect their product here, but I really feel like Logan Cooley has your best option to be the Calder winner in front of him.
All right, this is your hottest take for sure. I think that, but I think the way that you explained it makes sense. I like the logic here. I think you're right. I think Cooley is probably. I mean, the rookie class this year is outstanding.
Really good.
Like the best we've seen, maybe the best we've ever seen. Close to it. Maybe the best since Crosby, Ovechkin, like back after that 04-05 lockout, when they had so many talented players coming through. But I think that Cooley's in a great situation. Like you said, there is a youth movement. It looks like he's going to play with Genther to start the year, which will be really cool. Genther's another guy that I think is kind of under the radar, and is going to be a really strong player for that team. I as far as power play time being a guarantee, I actually I was watching the Australia game, and they actually had Genther as the fourth forward on the power play, not Cooley. That was the game where he pulled off that crazy spinorama, insane goal of the year candidate. But in terms of the power play, Genther was actually the fourth guy. I don't know if that's the way they'll roll it. I mean, I think you're right. I think that Cooley is probably, it's likely that he'll get power play one time, at least at some point this year. And I also agree that I think it's not out of the realm of possibility for him to to supplant Hayton on the top line with Keller and Schmaltz. And in that case, I mean, that line's
that's a
going to
line.
be
That's
unbelievable. Like unbelievable, man. They were already one of the best lines in the league near the end of the season for a stretch, with Barrett Hayton centering them. So imagine Logan Cooley there. So I just think he does have immense upside. I just don't think that, and I understand the argument for to kind of take Bedard down a peg, at least for this year, just because there's not really a ton of talent around him. I do think there's enough for him to be the best of the rookie class. And he is the best. Like he has the most upside. He is the generational talent. He's going to be the new face of the NHL in this next wave of youth. But Logan Cooley is not far off. But I don't see him pulling it off. But I think he's almost a lock for a finalist, though, to get top 3 in Calder voting. So in that way, I feel pretty good about it. Arizona's going to be fun to watch this year. I'm really excited to watch the Coyotes for the first time in maybe ever.
I'm actually a big fan of the franchise that they've got going there. Like, I know they're a laughing stock and they play in a literal mullet arena. Take that pun what you will, right? But like, just top to bottom, the youth there just excites me. When I fire up a franchise in NHL, I like going with them and then moving them to, I don't know, like Austin or Quebec or whatever.
I've done it.
And just playing with that franchise, but not in Arizona. So
yeah, keep the jerseys. I love the jerseys. All right. My last take is also about a rookie, but not one that a lot of people are talking about. So I think that Ollen Zellweger will be a Calder Trophy finalist. Now, I think this is my hottest take for sure. But let's take a look at Ollen Zellweger for a second. So last year in junior, he had 32 goals and 80 points as a defenseman. And then in the playoffs, he had 29 points in 14 games. Obviously, he is done in junior. Absolutely. Like this guy has crazy offensive upside. I think that, I mean, it's been talked about that he's likely the power play 1 quarterback of the future. I know that they have tons of talent there on the back end in terms of offensive defensemen. You got Jamie Drysdale, but he's in a contract stalemate right now. Like it doesn't sound like they're very close together. I know that it didn't sound like Zegras and the Ducks were very close together, and then he just signed. But
did he really?
He did. Yes, he signed
I didn't
yesterday.
hear that.
Yeah, so for significantly more than they were reporting that Anaheim wanted to give him, but I mean, still not a ton. Like it's a 3-year deal, I think under $6 million per year. So, but Jamie Drysdale is an interesting situation because he missed the entire year last year. So I don't think he has a ton of leverage, but it sounds like he's unhappy with what they're willing to give him. So that could continue. And quite frankly, like, I don't know that they need him. And I don't know that he is going to be their guy. Like, I don't think Fowler's a great power play 1 option. I know he played it last year and was relatively productive, but I don't think that that's where they want him to be. I don't think that he's that type of player. He was kind of just like, he was just the only one that made sense last year, especially after Klingberg got dealt. I just feel like Pavel Menchikov's the other guy that could potentially get some time. I think that the future is now. He's being paired consistently with Radko Gudas in practice and in preseason games. Pavel Menchikov is not playing with NHL defensemen. That to me makes me think that they're a little bit higher on Ollen Zellweger and are feeling like he is going to make the team this year. I think typically when, especially on defense, when you're consistently being paired with a guy that is a lock for the team, it's pretty likely that you're going to make the team. I could be wrong, but that's the assessment that I've made. He also has had more power play time on ice. Well, there's only here's the thing about Anaheim, and it sucks, is that a lot of their games are not being recorded. Like they're not being televised in the preseasons, and they're not able to get collect like advanced stats on it, which is it's extremely frustrating. But in the one game where they were both playing, Zellweger had more power play time on ice than Minchikov, and that makes me think that he's the preferred option. The defense on Anaheim is not deep, not even close. There's a lot of replacement level or below replacement level players on that core. Outside of Fowler and Gudis, I would argue that all of them are replacement level or worse. So the pathway to success is wide open for Ollen Zellweger there. I think he's going to make the team. He's going to play on power play 1. I don't think that their power play will be as bad next year. I think they were better than they didn't convert very well last year. They weren't the best in the world, but I think Zellweger definitely will help that. They've still got young talent. They got Troy Terry. They got Trevor Zegras. Mason McTavish is going to have he's got another season under his belt. I just am feeling like Ollen Zellweger is going to be like a super dark horse here, like a huge sleeper. So my thought is he's going to be a Calder Trophy finalist. Book it. What say you, John Binkle?
It's hard for me to peg him as a Calder finalist. And in the same breath, it's hard for me to peg him as like under the radar, considering this guy was the top defenseman in the WHL. He had the most points, the most assists for a defenseman. He twice won a juniors gold medal at different levels. He was CHL Defenseman of the Year. He won another gold medal in the juniors. He, again, in a different league, scored the most goals by a defenseman, right? Like every place, every station that he's stopped at, he's gotten the burn and had great success. So it almost took Minchikov to kind of like quiet the story around him, because like you said, there's not really any competition for them in Anaheim. It's not where they'll go, it's when they go, right? And clearly the opening opportunity is going to Zellweger thus far. Like you spoke about him being paired with Gudis and that being the strongest indicator for you. That makes total sense for me, right? Like the ability to put a smaller stature offensive defenseman next to Radko Gudas and ride them together makes so much sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And Zellweger absolutely has those skills. What I'm curious about, because I think it's certainly possible that he's a finalist. What I'm curious about is, what does the actual output in his season look like for you that makes him that candidate, right? Because it's going to take more than like a 3 and 4 week stretch here and there to put him in that finishing category. And what does that full season look like? Because the possibility I believe in, but and even to a certain extent, the success of the team offensively, I also believe in. But like, where does that end for you? Is he breaking 50 points?
Yeah, you know what? I may have to walk this back a little bit, because I'm not sure that I actually believe he's going to be a finalist. I just think I do think that he's going to be high up on that list and will surprise people. So maybe we'll say he's a top five in a vote getter in this rookie class. I just think there's so many big names. You got Fantilli, you got Cooley, you got Bedard, who, I mean, I think those three are probably the most likely to be the top 3 in terms of vote getting. But yeah, I don't know that Zellweger's that far behind. I could see, I mean, if he plays power play 1, between 40 and 50 points, and as a defenseman in your rookie season, that, I mean, I think that's pretty solid.
I
I
think
mean,
that makes. I don't even know that you have to walk that back because that tier of like finalists for that award is generally all of the scouts paying attention all the way down, right? Like you're
mhm.
receiving X amount of votes at each position, and I think given the runway and the team situation, I think you're absolutely right. I think Zellweger really could do it. I'm just curious what that actually looks like at the end of the
Yeah,
season, like how success. I guess really what I mean is how does that translate to your fantasy lineups? Like are you
sure.
taking a last round flyer on him, or is he a top of the watch list weight guy for you? Because as we've seen the preseason go by, like the indicators are really good that he's going to be like a top minute getter. Um, but is that actually translating to your draft? Because they've got off nights, but I know they're not a prime streaming candidate right off the bat. Are you more likely to go with a streamer in that spot, and then after the first few games transition to it?
Yeah, that's been the big factor. Is I have been taking streamers at the end of the draft, like guys from Seattle, guys from Nashville, guys from
New Jersey,
Chicago,
yeah.
New Jersey, yeah. um and not going with Zellweger. Now, the last couple drafts, I hadn't seen him being drafted in a redraft league at all.
Me
And I'm
neither.
like,
That's why I'm
I don't
curious.
know about this. But then and then um I had Jay Roma and Reese's Pieces in the voice chat for Listener League 2. And I was like, all right, little sneak peek to my hot takes. I think Zellweger is going to be huge this year. And then right after, Jay Roma's like, all right, Zellweger. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And then actually Nate took him uh, last night in the experts league. He had Nate won the league last year. He made a lot of deals, a lot of pick swaps to load up his team at the end of the year. And so that, I mean, so this year his draft was a bit of a mess because he was picking, I mean, a lot of his early picks ended up he swapped out for like the 13th, 14th, 15th round. So he had faded D quite a bit. So he ended up taking Zellweger because there just wasn't a lot left there. But I think that's a fair flyer. Like I genuinely think that you could take a flyer on him. I don't think it's going to take long. Like the only reason I'm not taking a flyer on him is I think there are a few other options late in the draft that I'm a little bit more confident about that aren't rookies. So like guys like Tony D'Angelo, I've been taking as
Oh yeah.
my fifth defenseman because he's just not getting respect at all, and I think he's going to have a much better season than people think. Um, and I think he's going to play on the top power play. Things have been. I mean, all indicators say that he's going to be playing on the top power play right now. So, and then, yeah, I mean, but then if those guys aren't available, then I'm definitely taking a flyer on Zellweger. But the other factor is, I'm also not 100% sure that it's going to work out the way that I'm saying. This is the assessment that I've made based on the information that I have. But am I 100% confident in that? No. So yeah, I think if you want to take him with the last pick of the draft, I 100%. But for me, he's going to be on my watch list.
I
And
mean, I like it. We're talking about a
yeah,
point per game player in the WHL on the Blazers, right? Which are,
mm-hmm.
like what? Just like the penultimate, like, um, breed offensive defenseman place to play in juniors, right? Like
Yeah, man,
the situation is great.
he's actually more than a point per game player, like almost a point and a half per game because they don't play as many games. He had 80 points. I should have had the games played here, but it actually is considerably more than a point per game. So 32 goals. That's the other thing too. It's not just points. It's not just playmaking, which is pretty normal for a defenseman. It's like this guy clearly has a shot. Like 32 goals for a defenseman is unreal. So, um, obviously it's junior, it's a WHL, but I think that there is some translatable talent, and I feel pretty strong that he's going to have a good year if he gets that opportunity.
I like it. I think he will.
All right. Well, that's all we have for today. Woo. Next week, sneak peek. Next week, the season starts, and we'll have our regular programming. Our new midweek podcast. I mean, it's going to be fairly similar to what it was before, but just with a few little tweaks. So we're pretty excited to get that going. But anyways, please leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you to those who already have. It's helped us a lot with our audience growth. We've seen a lot of growth in terms of our listenership over the last little while, and it's. I mean, this is the time when people are listening to fantasy hockey podcasts. So the fact that we've had so much growth and have had, a nice little percentage of the market in terms of listenership here is really, really awesome to see. Also, if you like our content, check out the Apples and Genos Patreon to support us on a monthly basis. Also hop into the Apples and Genos Discord server. We're having tons of discussions of fantasy hockey in there, and everyone's getting hype. I know I am. I'm getting itchy now that the drafts are done. I'm ready. I'm ready for the games to start. I'm ready to start streaming. Shout outs to the band there for providing our music. Their Spotify links in the episode description. Follow us on X. Binksy is at Binklemania. Nate is at Apples Genos. Blake is at Blake Creamer AG, and I'm at Just Josh and 41. Please practice safe stats and happy drafting. Have a good one, folks.
Good night, world.